The mining outpost on Theta 7 wasn't supposed to get visitors, much less ones that turned everything upside down. It was the kind of place forgotten by star maps and only remembered when someone wanted to bury something, usually secrets or someone. The human crew had grown used to silence, dust storms, and the endless rhythm of drilling through rock and solitude. Then, she arrived. She didn't walk like she belonged there. Her gait was smooth, curious, like a song trying to harmonize with static. Thin, tall, with bioluminescent lines tracing her collarbone and arms, the alien girl stepped off the unauthorized shuttle like she had done it 100 times. The second the ramp hissed shut behind her, the air in the compound changed. It wasn't fear. It was pressure. Glenn Riker, the outpost's mechanic, was the first to meet her eyes. Or rather, her shimmering, silver irises met his. She looked at him like she already knew him. He didn't believe in fate or galactic fairy tales. But something about the way she tilted her head when he wiped his brow set off a string of reactions neither of them understood yet. The rest of the crew, 7 tired souls, was cautious. They'd heard rumors of the T-Reni species, advanced, elegant, unpredictable. Their physiology was reactive, sensitive to smells, light frequencies, even microfluctuations in mood. And here she was, unannounced, claiming diplomatic clearance and acting like she didn't know the effect she had on the environment. At first, she didn't speak. Just observed. Took in the metallic corridors, the stripped-down tech, the way Glenn's shoulders tensed as he fixed the coolant stabilizer near the fusion core. But something changed the moment he slid out from under the generator, shirt stained with sweat and hands smeared in dust. She inhaled sharply. Her pupils dilated. Her breath hitched. Glenn noticed. She looked away too quickly, almost embarrassed. But the next few hours became increasingly strange. The climate controls malfunctioned. The humidity rose subtly. Lights flickered. And she kept glancing at him, specifically when he was working hard. By day 2, her body began to shift. Subtle at first. Her skin glowed warmer. Her voice carried an unfamiliar tone, something musical yet heavy. The outpost's medic, Janus, ran passive scans. Her endocrine levels were spiking. The data pointed to a T-Reni biological cycle rare and intense. It was called Selenia, loosely translated as the awakening. But it wasn't supposed to happen in off-world conditions. And never this fast. Janus confronted her. She just blinked and said, "It's him. The human. His sweat, it triggers me." Glenn didn't know how to process that. The crew became awkward around him, like he was carrying some chemical weapon. The alien girl, who now introduced herself as Vera, began to follow him discreetly. She wasn't predatory. She was enchanted. Every drop of sweat, every flex of his arm as he lifted parts or carried coolant packs, it stirred her biology deeper. She confessed during a sudden dust storm. Power flickered. The air was tense. They were alone in the service bay. "My body reacts to compatibility," she said softly. "It enhances me when I'm near a match. You, Glenn Riker, you're the anomaly." He laughed nervously. "That a good thing?" "I don't know yet," she admitted, touching the side of her neck where new patterns had formed, elegant, almost floral designs shimmering under her skin. That night, something malfunctioned in the main drill. Glenn had to go down alone. Vera insisted on accompanying him. It wasn't protocol, but no one objected. She seemed sharper, quicker. She fixed a malfunctioning circuit before Glenn even noticed the alert. When he asked how she knew, she simply said, "I feel your danger." Below ground, amidst the echoes of rumbling stone and old mining scars, Glenn slipped while maneuvering past a loose panel. She caught him with more strength than she should have had. He landed against her, hand on her arm, her forehead resting lightly on his chest. She froze. Then shivered. "My form's adapting," she murmured. "To what you are. Not just scent, but motion. Voice. Presence." Glenn didn't speak. Neither did she. For a long moment, they stood in the humming darkness. Then the drill roared back to life. When they returned to the surface, Vera's transformation was undeniable. Her body structure had subtly changed, wider hips, refined curves, her features sharper but even more mesmerizing. She looked fully awakened. Janus's scans confirmed heightened pheromone output, accelerated biological cycles, and brainwave syncing beginning to align with Glenn's neural rhythms. It was no longer a question of compatibility. Something deeper was happening, evolutionary, perhaps instinctual. And it wasn't isolated. Other outposts began reporting anomalies. Other T-Reni females showing signs of early awakenings when exposed to human environments. But none this extreme. The outpost was now on watch. But Glenn and Vera were already spiraling toward something neither species could fully predict or control. And Theta 7 was about to become ground zero for the first interspecies bond that would challenge every known law of biology, diplomacy, and fate. The third morning after Vera's arrival, Glenn awoke to the rhythmic pounding of alarms. At first, he thought it was the drill again, acting up like it always did after a thermal spike. But no, this was different. Red lights rotated across the narrow ceiling of his quarters, and the console beside his bed blared out an unauthorized atmospheric fluctuation warning. He grabbed his boots and headed straight for the main command center. Janus was already there, hunched over the console, eyes darting. Humidity's up 24%. Oxygen density too. Something's modifying the atmosphere. Terraforming protocols weren't even installed on this rock, Glenn said. They aren't. But something is mimicking the effect. It's not mechanical. It's biological. The moment Glenn heard that, he turned sharply toward the med bay's quarantine wing. Vera. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, palms open, eyes closed. Her skin pulsed in dim intervals, light rising and falling in perfect harmony with the beep of the life support monitors. Around her, the very air shimmered. The panels of the room's walls had begun to grow warm. The sensors were going haywire. Her presence alone was changing the environment. I tried to stop it, she whispered when Glenn entered. But it's happening on its own now. What is? He asked, taking a cautious step forward. My body's imprinting. On you. On this place. Her eyes opened slowly. There was no fear in them. Only wonder and something else. Something deeper, ancient, and instinctual. The crew was on edge. Commander Hurst, who had kept mostly out of the way until now, finally voiced what everyone feared. She's a walking biohazard. She's shifting the atmosphere, modifying variables we don't even track. One misstep, and she could destabilize the whole station. She's not doing it on purpose, Glenn said, fists clenched. Intent doesn't matter when the side effects could kill us all. But before the crew could cast their vote on whether to isolate her completely, or worse, Vera did something no one expected. She vanished. The moment the security systems blinked out for 4 seconds, a moment Janus later described as a blackout in the biometric grid, Vera was gone. Not a trace of her in the ventilation systems, not a shimmer on any of the security feeds. Only one camera caught the faintest silhouette leaving through the outer hatch, her luminous skin dimmed to nearly invisible. Glenn didn't wait. He loaded a thermal pack, oxygen supply, and tracker beacon, and he went after her. The terrain outside Theta 7's perimeter was brutal, jagged obsidian ridges, deep craters from failed mining attempts, and sharp metallic winds that could slice a suit in hours. But Glenn moved fast. Driven. Something inside him had ignited the moment she disappeared. He found her hours later, nestled inside an ancient crater half swallowed by sandstorms. The sky above shimmered with electrical streaks as twin moons began to rise. She was standing beneath a natural arch of rock, arms raised slightly, as if speaking to the wind. I thought I could contain it, she said without turning. You left without saying anything. I had to. Your people were afraid. I didn't want to hurt anyone. Then why are you doing this? He demanded. She turned slowly. Because something ancient in me recognizes you. My body is evolving in response, yes, but more than that. You anchor something in me that I didn't know could exist. You mean attraction? Glenn asked, confused. She shook her head. No. Resonance. Lightning cracked across the sky, and for a brief second, he saw her completely, hair drifting like smoke, skin a radiant opal shade, eyes reflecting the world like twin mirrors. You changed the station's environment just by existing near me, he said, stepping closer. I changed because of you. My people call it sail ray, the spiral calling. It's rare. Forbidden, even. Because once it begins, there's no undoing it. We evolve to survive beside a match. And only one. And if that match rejects you, he asked, heart thudding. We break. Permanently. Glenn paused. That's why you left. I was afraid you'd say no. I didn't say no. She looked up, searching his face. I didn't even get a chance, he added, softer this time. They stayed like that for long minutes, the desert wind lashing around them, charged air humming like a living entity. Back at the outpost, systems began to recalibrate without explanation. Climate stabilized. Humidity returned to safe levels. The AI could no longer track Vera, but all internal malfunctions ceased. When Glenn and Vera returned days later, it was under a silent sky. Something in her had balanced. The radiant glow had mellowed, her presence no longer overwhelming the systems, but instead coexisting with them. Janus looked at her with awe. You've integrated. She nodded. He accepted. The shift completed. There were still questions. What did it mean long-term? Was Glenn changing too? Janus's scans suggested microalignments in his pheromonal signatures, even slight neural fluctuations. But the biggest change was in Vera's voice. She sounded human now. Not mimicking. Matching. And something unseen, something immeasurable, had been born between them, something that neither law nor science could yet define. But it was only the beginning. Because far across the stars, other T-Reni were beginning to react. And Earth Command had just sent a scout ship to investigate Theta 7. The galaxy wasn't ready for what would come next. But Glenn and Vera would face it together. The scout ship from Earth Command broke atmosphere like a spear slicing through silk. It hovered over Theta 7 for 3 hours before finally initiating contact. By then, the entire crew of the mining outpost had already gathered in the commons, exchanging anxious glances. Glenn sat next to Vera, their hands barely touching, as if any more contact might trigger something even bigger. Commander Hurst paced the length of the room, chewing the inside of his cheek. This is more than routine. They're not here for minerals. They're here because of her. He didn't say it like an accusation anymore. He said it like a warning. When the ship's ramp descended, 2 figures stepped into the dust-choked light. One wore the sleek black uniform of Central Command. The other was T-Reni. But unlike Vera, this T-Reni was armored in ceremonial robes, skin a cool lavender blue and devoid of the radiant patterning Vera now carried. Her eyes were sharp and cold. There was no curiosity in her gaze, only judgment. I am Enclave Speaker Malis, the alien said, her voice metallic. I have come to retrieve the awakened one. Vera stood. I will not go. You have no choice. Your cycle was triggered by a non-sanctioned bond. That is against the T-Reni protocol of coexistence. You know what that means. I also know what the ancient archives say, Vera replied calmly. Sailray is not a violation. It is a convergence. Malis stepped forward. You are not authorized to speak ancient laws. I don't need authorization. My body spoke first. Glenn started to rise, but Vera's hand gently pressed him down. She wasn't scared. Not anymore. Not of them. The Central Command officer spoke next. We have scans from Theta 7 confirming atmospheric changes, system disturbances, and potential neural convergence. This is uncharted territory. We need to study this under containment. You're talking about locking us up, Glenn said. We're talking about protecting both species, the officer replied. If her biology continues adapting to you, and yours begins adapting to hers, we don't know what the consequences might be. Janus stepped in. I've run the tests. Glenn's vital signs are perfectly stable. And Vera has *balanced. Her presence no longer disrupts our systems. Perhaps. But this isn't about your station anymore. It's about what this means on a galactic scale, the officer said. Malis added, if left unchecked, this convergence could spread. Others might trigger. The T-Reni are not prepared to co-evolve with humanity. Not yet. And if we are, Glenn said. What if this is the beginning of something bigger than rules and fear? Malis didn't respond. But the silence was an answer in itself. That night, Vera and Glenn watched the stars from the roof of the observatory dome. Below them, diplomats from two worlds argued over their future. Up here, the silence was clearer. They'll try to separate us, she said. I won't let them. You might not have a choice. He turned to face her. I always have a choice. And I choose *U. Even if we have to run. Her eyes shimmered, the swirling patterns in her skin growing faintly brighter. There is one option. A bonding ritual. Old as T-Reni culture itself. If completed, neither side can interfere. It makes us permanently aligned. What does it involve? Risk. Pain. Fusion. If done wrong, it could destroy one or both of us. But if done right, it seals us, Glenn whispered. She nodded. In mind, body, and biology. The ritual could only be performed under certain conditions, at night, under dual moons, at the site of natural resonance. The crater where Glenn had first found her matched the criteria. So they went. No one followed. Whether out of respect, confusion, or fear, no one dared interrupt. The ceremony was simple in steps but profound in sensation. Vera stood opposite Glenn, arms raised. Her patterns began to shift, swirling into symbols of her ancient people. Glenn mirrored her, opening his palms as she did. The moment their fingers touched, the world tilted. A surge of pressure slammed into them, like falling through time. Memories flashed. Not just their own, but impressions of each other's histories. Vera saw Glenn's childhood, the loss of his brother, the long days in isolation fixing broken machines. Glenn saw her training as a diplomat, her secret shame of feeling incomplete, the longing that followed her across galaxies. Their breath synced. Heartbeats slowed. The light around them pulsed with a rhythm not of this world. Then came the final step. A drop of blood from each. Not much. Just enough to mix, absorbed into the soil. The stars above responded. The moons flared briefly with color. And Vera collapsed. Glenn caught her just in time. She was burning with light, body trembling. But her voice was steady. It is done. The bond is sealed. Back at the outpost, the central command team picked up a pulse from the crater, an energy surge that registered across 3 nearby systems. The T-Reni envoy fell silent. Malis turned away, her eyes wide with something between fear and reverence. He completed the rite, she whispered. The Earth officer looked baffled. What does that mean? It means, Malis sighed. We cannot touch them now. What happens next? We wait. And prepare. Because the bond between Glenn and Vera was more than a union. It was a beacon. And across the galaxy, others were beginning to feel its call. The weeks that followed passed like a blur. The crew of Theta 7 resumed operations, but everything was different. Not just in the routines, but in the way they looked at the stars, and at each other. Something had shifted, an understanding, unspoken but shared. Glenn and Vera remained at the outpost, though now they were no longer just engineer and visitor. They were something more, something sacred. The bond between them had stabilized into a harmony so subtle it was almost imperceptible, yet everyone felt it. Even the machines did. Diagnostics that had failed for months now calibrated effortlessly. The reactor maintained consistent flow. Communication signals that had once been disrupted by Theta 7's storms now cut clean across the systems. It was as if the outpost, long forgotten by the galaxy, had been reborn alongside them. Earth Command and the T-Reni Enclave didn't interfere again, not directly. They monitored from a distance, cautiously observing but never daring to touch what they now considered a singularity. A convergence that could not be replicated, only witnessed. But others did come. They arrived in ones and twos at first, T-Reni explorers, human envoys, scholars, and thinkers. Curious about the bond. Drawn to its mystery. Some came seeking knowledge, others guidance. And some, quietly and earnestly, came looking for their own resonance. Vera and Glenn welcomed them all. They shared what they could, what little they understood. But they made one thing clear: this was never meant to be duplicated like an equation. It was something that had happened despite everything, not because of anything. It had taken risk, trust, pain, and ultimately, love. One evening, under the dual moons again, Glenn stood on the observatory platform, looking down at the camp that had grown around the outpost. Tents, habitats, researchers. A place once filled with dust and silence now buzzed with life and possibility. Vera joined him, her skin still carrying the soft, swirling echoes of their bond. "You ever think," she said, "how strange it is that it all started with sweat?" Glenn laughed. "You make it sound so romantic." She nudged him with her shoulder. "To my people, it is ... They fell quiet, content in the stillness. "What do you think will happen to the galaxy now?" he asked after a while. "It'll change," she said simply. "Slowly. Carefully. But it will ... Because of us. Because we reminded them what's possible when you don't run from what's different. When you listen, instead of control." Glenn nodded. "That's a good thing to remember." And so Theta 7, once a place forgotten, became a beacon. Not of war. Not of technology. But of connection. In the decades that followed, interspecies diplomacy improved. A generation of T-Reni children learned human languages. Human scientists studied resonance. A new field of study emerged, biosympathetic convergence theory. But the core of it, the first of it, always remained untouched. A human engineer. A T-Reni diplomat. And a moment when fear gave way to something greater. Moral . True evolution doesn't always come from power, progress, or domination. Sometimes, it begins with vulnerability. With two beings willing to change for each other, not to lose themselves, but to grow into something new. In a galaxy driven by control, the most revolutionary act was love. And love, in its purest form, needs no translation.